My name is Rachel Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb just outside Columbus, Ohio. For most of my life, I believed my family was normal. Not perfect, but normal. We had dinners together on Sundays. My mom sent birthday cards even after I moved out. My dad taught me how to drive in an empty parking lot when I was 16, and he never once raised his voice at me. So when I tell you what happened on a Tuesday morning in March, I need you to understand. Nothing about my life had prepared me for it. It started with a box. A plain, brown cardboard box sitting on my doorstep when I opened the door to get the mail. No return address, no note taped to the front. Just my name, written in my mother's handwriting, and a single strip of masking tape sealing it shut. Underneath my name, in smaller letters, she had written 7 words. Do not open this until we call. I stood there in my bathrobe, staring at that box for a long time. My hands were already shaking, and I didn't even know why yet. But I had no idea that box would end up rewriting everything I thought I knew about my own family. To understand why that box terrified me, you need to understand who my parents were to me. Growing up, my mother, Linda, was the kind of woman who remembered everything. Every allergy, every deadline, every small worry I ever mentioned to her once, and then forgot about myself. My father, Gerald, was quieter, but steady. He worked 31 years at the same manufacturing plant, and he used to say that the most important thing a man could give his family was consistency. They weren't wealthy. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a leaky garage roof that never quite got fixed. But we were close, or at least, I thought we were. When I moved 2 hours away for a marketing job in my mid-20s, my parents drove up every few months just to check on me. My mom would bring homemade soup in case I wasn't eating properly. My dad would quietly fix whatever was broken in my apartment without me even asking. I used to tell my friends, half joking, that my parents were almost too good to be true. I wish I noticed the signs earlier, because looking back now, there were small things, quiet moments, that I brushed off without a second thought. About 8 months before the box arrived, something shifted. My parents started calling less. When they did call, the conversations felt shorter, more careful, like they were choosing their words instead of just talking to me the way they always had. Once I stopped by their house unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, and I noticed a stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter, all addressed to a law office I didn't recognize. When I asked about it, my mother swept the envelopes into a drawer so fast it startled me. Just some paperwork for your father's retirement, she said, but her eyes didn't meet mine when she said it. Then there was the night my dad mentioned, almost in passing, that they were thinking about selling the house. My childhood home, the one with the leaky garage roof he never fixed. He said it so casually, like it was nothing, but something about the way my mother quickly changed the subject made my stomach tighten. I told myself it was nothing. Parents downsize, parents retire, parents deal with paperwork. That's what I kept telling myself, right up until the morning that box showed up on my doorstep with a warning not to open it. I called my mother the moment I found the box. She didn't pick up. I called my father, straight to voicemail. For 3 days, I didn't touch that box. I set it on my kitchen table and stared at it every time I walked past. I texted, I called, I even messaged my aunt to ask if she'd heard from them. Nothing. On the 3rd night, unable to sleep, I finally got a call. Not from my parents, but from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman named Patricia, introducing herself as a family attorney. She told me, gently but plainly, that my parents had asked her to check in on me, and that they were safe, but dealing with a private matter they weren't ready to discuss yet. I asked her directly, "Does this have anything to do with the box?" There was a pause on the line. Then she said something I'll never forget. "They didn't want you finding out this way, but I think it might be time you opened it." That's when everything changed. I sat at my kitchen table with my hands trembling, staring at that sealed box under the dim light above the stove. Part of me wanted to call someone, a friend, anyone, just so I wouldn't have to face it alone. But another part of me, the part that had spent 29 years trusting these 2 people completely, needed to know the truth by myself first. I peeled back the tape. Inside, wrapped in an old towel I recognized from my childhood bathroom, was a stack of documents, bank statements, property records, and a letter, folded in thirds, in my father's handwriting. I unfolded it with shaking hands, and the first line alone brought tears to my eyes before I'd even finished reading it. "Rachel, if you're reading this, it means we ran out of time to tell you ourselves. We're so sorry." I remember sitting there afterward, letter in my lap, feeling like the floor of my entire life had quietly dropped out from underneath me. Every Sunday dinner, every homemade soup delivery, every quiet fix my father made around my apartment. Had any of it meant what I thought it meant? I wish I could tell you I stayed calm. I didn't. I cried until I couldn't breathe properly, and then I read the letter again, because some small, stubborn part of me hoped I had misunderstood it the first time. I hadn't. The documents told a story my parents had been hiding from me for almost a year. My father had been secretly diagnosed with a serious illness the previous spring. Rather than tell me right away, my parents made a decision together. A decision I understood, but one that still shattered something in me when I found out. They didn't want me to spend my 20s worrying, planning around bad news, watching them decline. So they quietly began putting their affairs in order, selling the house, setting up a trust, preparing documents that would protect me financially no matter what happened, all without a single word to me. The box wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a betrayal in the way I'd first feared, lying awake those 3 sleepless nights imagining the worst. It was them trying to protect me, in the only way they knew how, by carrying the weight alone so I wouldn't have to carry it too soon. But knowing their intentions didn't erase the hurt of being shut out. I had spent 3 days terrified, imagining every possible explanation, while the people I trusted most made a unilateral decision about what I could and couldn't handle. What happened next still shocks me, because it wasn't the ending I expected at all. I want to be clear about something here. This isn't a story about revenge in the way you might expect. There was no villain to expose, no courtroom moment, no dramatic public reckoning. The only thing I needed to reclaim was my voice in my own family. So instead of revenge, I made a decision. I drove the 2 hours to my parents' house the very next morning, letter in hand, and for the first time in my adult life, I told them exactly how their silence had made me feel. I told my mother that protecting me from pain wasn't the same as protecting me from the truth. I told my father that 31 years of steady, quiet love didn't give him the right to make my biggest decisions for me without a conversation. It wasn't a screaming match. It was worse, in a way. It was quiet, honest, and it made all 3 of us cry in a kitchen that suddenly felt very small. In the weeks that followed, we did something we had never done before as a family. We started talking, really talking, about the hard things. My father began treatment. My mother stopped hiding paperwork in drawers. And I made a decision of my own. I took a leave from my job and moved back in with them for 3 months. Not because they asked me to, but because I refused to let them carry anything alone again. I quietly began learning everything about his treatment schedule, his medications, his appointments. I built a shared calendar so nothing would ever be a secret between us again. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't cinematic, it was spreadsheets and pharmacy pickups and long nights in hospital waiting rooms. But every single one of those quiet, unremarkable moments felt like taking back something that box had almost taken from me: trust. There was no public exposure in this story, no villain unmasked in front of a crowd. If there was any exposure at all, it happened privately, at my parents' kitchen table, when I finally said out loud what I'd been feeling since that box arrived, that love without honesty isn't the same as protection. It's just a different kind of loneliness. My mother admitted, through tears, that she had been terrified I would resent them, or worse, that I'd fall apart the way she had when her own mother got sick years earlier. My father admitted he simply didn't know how to have the conversation without breaking down in front of me. That honesty, messy, overdue, imperfect, was its own kind of justice, not against them, but for all of us. My father's treatment, thankfully, went better than any of us dared to hope. A year later, he's still here, still fixing things around my apartment without being asked, still teaching me things in that same quiet, steady way he always has. But something between us changed permanently, in a good way. We don't hide hard news from each other anymore. When my mother had a health scare of her own 8 months later, she told me the same day, no box, no delay, no attorney phone call in the middle of the night. The version of our family that emerged from that sealed box wasn't the one I grew up believing in, the one where everything was fine, where nothing ever went wrong behind closed doors. It was something more honest, more fragile, but more real. Looking back now, I understand why my parents did what they did. They loved me enough to want to shield me from pain. What I had to teach them, and what I had to learn myself, was that real love isn't about shielding the people you care about from the truth. It's about trusting them enough to face it together. If there's one thing I'd want anyone watching this to take away from my story, it's this. Silence, even when it comes from love, can hurt just as deeply as betrayal. And sometimes the bravest thing a family can do isn't protecting each other from hard truths. It's finding the courage to share them. That sealed box sits in my closet now, empty, the tape long gone. I kept it, not as a reminder of the fear it once brought me, but as a reminder of everything that came after. The conversation we almost never had. The honesty we finally learned to give each other. If someone in your life is carrying something heavy and hiding it out of love, maybe don't wait for a sealed box to force the conversation. Ask them today.